Hello everyone and welcome to Green Magic, your source for all things green and magic. Welcome to the Deck Tech series. This will cover the builds of my own personal decks. I change my decks fairly often and have all of them listed on deckstats.com, so if you're interested in seeing the most current version or look ahead to other decks, you can find me there under Green Magic, and there's a direct link in the description. Each deck will be featured in two parts. The first video to each deck tech will show all 100 cards contained in the deck, prices for those cards, and some insight for the interactions between cards. It's important when building a deck to have goals, restrictions, and themes, so I'll be sure to cover where the decks are coming from. The second video for each commander will be about changes and alterations you could make to the deck. Personalizing your decks is important to most players, so if you like a commander and want to build it yourself, I'm including several recommendations for you to make the deck your own. Alright, it's been a while, but let's get into deck tech number 4. This one will be for Multani, Yavamaya's avatar. I do want to make this one pretty short because it is relatively simple and straightforward in how it functions. There's not much to say about the card type breakdown. 35 lands, 30 creatures, 10 artifacts, 9 enchantments, 1 instant, 15 sorceries, no planeswalkers. There's not a whole lot of significance to those numbers. The main thing is that the deck will try to win through combat damage, creature damage. So 30 is kind of at a decent point there. Not super high, not overly emphasizing the creatures. The other number worth pointing out is the Sorceries 15. The reason for having that quantity, more or less, is that there are plenty of ways to ramp. You're looking to ramp through cultivate effects and the like. So this deck is relatively budget. It's only $132 and change. It's got a few basic restrictions. It doesn't go infinite. The primary idea or concept to the deck is that the creatures are star creatures where their power and or toughness are equal to the number of lands. And it tries to win through either combat damage, generically speaking, or commander damage, more specifically. Because the other creatures do basically the same thing that Multani does in terms of power toughness. And it's really easy to get him tough enough or big enough, powerful enough to just one-shot people. The land base is very simple and straightforward. It's 1 Nykthos, 1 Myriad Landscape, and the rest are just basic forests, 33 of them. The reason that I would want to keep it relatively straightforward is a lot of the other creatures, their power toughness thing is based off of forest or basic lands, whereas Multani Yavamaya's avatar is based off of any land. So for the benefit of everybody else, you just want forest. And really, there's not a whole lot of other things that I'd want to put in the deck anyway. So let's start by talking about the ways to get lands. There are a bunch of sorceries, as I mentioned, the function of which is to get lands. Colony Heart Expedition, not a sorcery, but that's not important. Kadama's Reach, Cultivate, Nissa's Pilgrimage, Skyshroud Claim, Hunting Wilds, Ranger's Path, Migration Path, Traverse the Outlands, and Boundless Realms. There's 5 more. That would be Nissa's Triumph, Explosive Vegetation, Circuitous Route, Vastwood Surge, and Nissa's Renewal. Their job is just to get you extra lands. Most of those get the lands into play. Kadama's Reach, Cultivate, Nissa's Pilgrimage, they'll give you a land to hand. Nissa's Triumph in the top left there, that'll get you 2 lands to hand, nothing into play, but it's good to not miss land drops. Even though it doesn't ramp you, it'll still help you to make sure that you're getting forests out there. Traverse the Outlands and Boundless Realms are obviously 2 of the most powerful ones because they'll effectively double the amount of lands in play. Other than that, everything's pretty straightforward. In addition to having the sorceries that get you the lands, I do run 10 creatures. Wood Elf, Silverglade Elemental, Avatar of Growth, Yavimaya Dryad, Farhaven Elf, Sylvan Ranger, Arboreal Grazer, Ondu Giant, Quarian Trailblazer, and Wild Wanderer. Sylvan Ranger is the only one that will get you the land to hand. Wood Elf, Silverglade Elemental, Avatar of Growth all get them into play untapped, with Avatar of Growth getting 2 for every player. Arboreal Grazer is the only one that will take a land from hand and put it into play. It doesn't have to be basic, could be any of your others. So you could play a forest for turn and then use him to put in the Myriad Landscape, like a turn 1 play. The reason why I want these creatures instead of more sorceries, even though the sorceries would be more efficient from a mana cost to how many lands they get you ratio, seeing as how some of these are 4 mana and only get you 1 land. The reason for having them is to, 1, have bodies into play early, so just so you have chump blockers. 2, to have bodies for later that you can put things onto to buff them. I'll get more into that later. The next major creature type, basically the only other creature type in the deck, are the things that kind of define what the deck is about. Creatures with star for their power in some way, shape, or form. Rampaging Brontodon, it does not, and Timbermaw Larva don't actually have it. What they do is when each of them attack, they get +1/+1. In the case of Rampaging Brontodon, it gets +1/+1 when it attacks for each land. Timbermaw Larva for each forest. Multani Yavamaya's avatar is technically a 0/0, but it does get +1/+1 for each land, either that you have in play or in your graveyard. Some of the other ones, they only have 1/2 of the equation. Taproot Kami only has star for toughness, and it also has defender, but it does have reach, so it's a great blocker, especially to get out early. People of the Woods, double green mana to cast it, and its toughness is again equal to the number of forests you have. It is not good offensively because it only has 1 power. It is just another blocker and something that fits the theme of the deck, as well as being able to play a card that doesn't see much play, which is a big part of what Commander is about. Coiling Woodworm is a 3 mana 1 that gives you power equal to the number of forests in play. So it would be a great attacker, provided you have a way to give it trample or otherwise make it unblocked. Otherwise, it can be chumped by just a 1/1 and then trade no matter how big its power is. So if you can give it trample, it doesn't matter if they block and kill it, as long as like 18 damage tramples through. Treefolk Seedlings, that one again has toughness equal to the number of forests, just another good blocker. Oran Reef Hydra is the only one in the deck that's actually landfall. All the other creatures don't care whether the lands were already in play before they were cast or after they're in play. This is the only one that, if you have all your forests in play before you ever cast this, he's never going to get bigger. You got to cast him before doing the landfall. So he's the only one that you got to be careful and make sure that you cast as fast as possible. Now 10 more creatures. Same basic idea for all of them across the board. Gaia's Liege, Allosaurus Rider, Ashaya, Soul of the Wild, Beanstalk Giant, Colonian Twingrove, Utabi Wildcats, Dauntless Dowerback, Ovenwold Hydra, Dungrove Elder, and Molimo Morrow Sorcerer. Worth pointing out is that Gaia's Liege, because when he attacks, his power and toughness will be equal to the number of force the defending player controls. You're either going to want him as a blocker and or use his tap ability to turn your opponent's lands into force, just to screw them over on colors. Allosaurus Rider is something that you could discard 2 green cards from your hand, exile them, in order to skip the mana cost. That's something that you would want to do in mid-game if somehow you've gotten all of your lands in play, more or less. But you have those sorceries, the cultivates, explosive vegetations, that at that point don't do anything. Exile them out of your hand, cast them for free. Ashaya makes all of your creatures into lands, which means that all of your creatures are stronger because now they're counting each other. Beanstalk Giant has the first ability of sorcery to get a land into play untapped. Usually you're going to want to do that. Colonian Twingrove gets a second token copy of himself. Utabi Wildcats has Regenerate. Ovenwold Hydra can get you an extra land when it ETBs, and if you don't already have Nykthos, that's what you'd probably get. If not, maybe Myriad Landscape. Dauntless Dowerback can have Trample if you have one of the other, I believe there are 3 tree folks in the deck besides himself. That can give him Trample and slightly buff him up. Dungrove Elder has Hexproof, and Molimo has Trample. Interestingly enough, Molimo was the original commander of the deck until I discovered Multani, who is 1 mana cheaper and has reach and counts lands in the graveyard. Multani is a strictly better Molimo, I think. For the card draw, I didn't go too powerful. I wanted to keep it all within reason, so the cards involved in the deck for card draw. Lifecrafter's Bestiary, a card I generally don't promote as being a very strong card overall. Just another way to keep the deck within reason. Karuk's Uprising, great, also both for card draw, also giving Trample. Harmonize, generically okay. Zendikar Resurgent, that's one of the main reasons that you wouldn't want to replace those 10 creatures that fetch you lands, the Wood Elf type effects, with more sorceries that get you lands. is because at least more creatures synergize with Zendikar Resurgent. Elemental Bond only works for creatures with power 3 or greater. That one will not apply to all but I think 1 or 2 of the creatures that fetch you lands, and then mostly the star creatures. Obviously, a couple of the star creatures that have star for the toughness won't matter, but it'll draw you a decent number of cards. Drum Hunter is a card that I think is overall pretty overrated and overused in Commander, but it is a fairly cheap mana, dollar cost-wise, and it's a way to keep the deck within reason, not trying to overpower it. Triumph of Ferocity just gives you an extra draw per turn. Mind's Eye, another card that, you know, if you have the mana, you can draw 3 cards per rotation at the very least. Abzan Beastmaster and Colossal Majesty, just another way to draw 1 extra card per turn. So the deck doesn't try to overdraw, it just tries to keep everything in reason. If you wanted to power up the deck, you would want things that draw you cards equal to the power of the greatest creature you have, the greatest power among creatures. That's not really what I tried to do with this deck. So let's talk about the things that give more power. Aspect of Wolf and Blanchwood Armor basically just are auras that give the equipped creature +X/+X, where that's the number of forests that you have. Aspect of Wolf is half. Blanchwood Armor is 1-for-1. 1 forest equals 1 power and toughness. Obviously, that means Aspect of Wolf is half as good, but it still fits the theme, and half as good is still pretty good. 2 mana to give one of your creatures, +8/+8, whereas Blanchwood Armor is +16/+16. They're both good effects for the mana cost, and well on theme. Primal Rage, just another way to give your guys trample, which is very important when you have giant creatures. You don't want a giant creature to be blocked by some 1/1, 2/2, whatever, and that's it. Blackblade Reforged and Stratascythe, 2 more. These ones are equipments that are on the same idea of the previous auras. They just buff your creature, whatever creature they're attached to, equal to the number of lands you have. And then you see a handful more equipment on bottom. Grappling Hook and Fire Seeker are both intended to give double strike. Inquisitor's Flare has it deal double damage. And then Grafted Exoskeleton is for Infect, just so that, a mid-power creature, like an 8 or 10 power creature, can still one-shot. Basilisk Collar is to give Death Touch and Lifelink. The Death Touch is especially relevant when paired with Trample, and the Lifelink is just a way to keep you alive. It's just an extra thing that helps a little bit. Akroma's Memorial is the last major power-helping card of the deck. It'll give your stuff Flying, First Strike, Vigilance, Trample, Haste, Pro-Red, Pro-Black. Oftentimes when you put this down, if you've already got everything set up, it can help you win the game on the spot. And then the final card in the deck is Early Harvest. This is just something that will allow you to untap all of your basic lands. I don't run Rude Awakening in the deck because I'm not trying to go overboard on that effect. At least having 1 is still very helpful, and when you draw it, if you got 12 lands in play, use 3 mana on this, float the other 9, and then you have 21 total mana to work with, and it can do a lot of work for you. Let's just go over the price of the deck real quick. You've got 3 cards over $10. Akroma's Memorial, Nykthos, and Traverse the Outlands. In total, those 3 will cost you $55.95. And then you have 5 cards over $5. The Dauntless Dowerback, Ashaya Soul of the Wild, Mind's Eye, Ulvenwald Hydra, and Avatar of Growth. Those 5 will cost $29.89, so with the starting cost being at $132.39 for the whole deck, you could save $85.84 by removing these 8 cards. So the other 92 cards will cost you $46.55. Very budget, and then it would be very easy from there to fill in the 8 holes with whatever other cheap cards to have an under $50 deck.